Hello, everyone, and good morning. Welcome to our live feed update for September 22nd. Sorry, 21st. It's the 21st. That's because it's not a proper update today. I'm your host, Taran Armstrong, and I'm here to not only update you on what happened yesterday, which I can tell you now, not a whole lot going on, but also I am here to be to recap the first of the final three and their games across the whole season of Big Brother 21. Today, I will be talking about Holly and what she has done throughout the season, week to week, how she got here, and everything in between. So that's what we'll be talking about. I can get it out of the way right now. Not much going on in the feeds yesterday. They're waiting for part two. We did get one thing about part two. There was a brief leak about part two of the final three HOH competition. It's very clear that this competition is some kind of days competition, which actually is pretty relevant to Holly because she's not great at days. And so depending on the difficulty of this competition, it looks like there are something around, 5, maybe like 12 slots with days labeled on them. If she has trouble with that, which she has in the past, then we may see Nicole take home part two of the final three HOH, which may or may not be a good thing for Holly, to be honest. But there may be a physical component to it that we can't really see yet, so that may give Holly an advantage. But beyond that, there's not much to update you on. We will be seeing the feeds go down today, I imagine, for this Veto or this part two of the HOH competition. And then we'll hopefully get the results at some point later tonight, and then we'll have an idea of what we're looking at tomorrow morning. So we'll see. But in the meantime, let's take a look at Holly's game for Big Brother 21. Let's do it. You guys ready? I didn't get any water. I should have got water. These are a lot. Let's do this. So, Holly enters the game in a different way than most people do. She came in with a pre-existing relationship. She knew Kat. Now, allegedly, they strategized before entering the house. They planned on playing separate games, but secretly working together. And allegedly, part of potentially removing somebody from the cast and Christy entering as an alternate. That was more Kat than Holly, but they were, and they did confirm this a bit on the feeds, in contact prior to sequester, and planning things out before the show. So she comes in with this massive advantage, obviously, and she gets into the house. Immediately, you got the camp director twist, and she does eventually support Jackson's campaign for camp director. She was not chosen for banishment, and then Christy is going to win the first HOH. Christy is going to nominate Kat and Cliff, with Kat as the initial target. So not a great start for Holly there in terms of her, secret connection. But what are you going to do? Grateful as an alliance is formed. She was not a primary member of it, but she was brought into it, and that is going to be one of the most important parts of her game. This involvement within Grateful. She is developing relationships, in particular with Jackson. She has one with Kat. She develops one with Christy as well, and that relationship with Christy is going to be the most important to her, especially in these early weeks. She also develops one with Sis, but that is kind of on the back burner at first. It doesn't really develop until a little bit later. Now, Christy, she's targeting Kat, but Bella's gonna Bella. And she does some Bella-ing. And she throws Kemi under the bus and gets Kemi targeted as the backdoor target. Target's now off Kat onto Kemi. That's perfect for Bella. That's perfect for Holly. And the week is looking a lot better at that point. Now, Kat is with Jackson. Kat has developed a relationship with Jackson that they are, making Jackson's mother uncomfortable, I guess, is what Jackson might describe it as. And she doesn't love Jackson's relationship with Bella because at this time, Jackson and Bella were very tight. They were talking about moving in together. What a time it was. And so Kat is actually going to get into Holly's ear about Jack and Jackson and how Bella told her, Kat, that Jack and Jackson have a final two. And so Bella can't be trusted. And so Bella should be the one that's going down, not Kemi. That's what Kat thinks. And Holly is convinced. All right, I'm anti-Bella now. She's in my alliance, but I'm skeptical of her. Now remember, Holly has this. I always used to confuse Bella and Holly with the names, and now I'm doing it again. Now Holly is concerned about Bella within this group of Grateful, and Holly is going to bring that anti-Bella narrative to Sis, and start spreading the anti-Bella narrative that comes from Kat because of her relationship with Jackson. Holly is also going to be a little bit anti-Jack in these early weeks, this early week in particular. Holly, as I said, has a relationship with Jackson. You can tell immediately that Jackson has, by the time the feeds come up, that Jackson has already moved on from Kat, and he would prefer to be with Holly. And Holly is into that as well. They're both flirting a bit, and Holly is trying to pull Jackson away from Jack. Jack was Jackson's primary relationship, his primary alliance, but Jack had betrayed Jackson in a small way by telling Christy about Jackson's relationship with Kat, and Jackson wasn't fond of that, so Holly was using that to pull Jackson away from Jack and toward herself, and that was something that did succeed. Now, as you all know, at this time, Christy is freaking out most of the week. One freak out in particular is going to happen when she sees Jack talking to Kemi. She's like, why is he talking to Kemi? And so she starts to second guess the plan to backdoor Kemi. And so all of this is happening, Holly kind of trying to pull Jackson away from Jack led to Jackson talking to Christy, talking about how he doesn't want to be seen as too close to Jack, too close to Holly, too close to Kat, and got in Christy's mind that she's too close to Jack, and so she starts pulling away from Jack, and it's a whole big mess. And that's part of what's happening there. Then Kat has a bit of a freak out and gets in trouble with Jack. Now, the whole situation with Jack and Kemi talking, Kat got involved and ended up relaying information to Christy and back to Jack, and ends up getting in trouble with Jack. This is a very uncomfortable conversation that we witnessed early in the game. Really let us know who we were dealing with Jack right away, as he really just intimidate. Like, she's trying to get information out. He's like, "What are you saying?" She's like, I just. So that's happening there. It gets her in trouble with Jack. It gets her in trouble with Jackson, and that's a big mess. But Jack has been pushing for Nick to go out because Christy is now like, no, I don't want to do Kemi. Jack is now like, okay, well, let's do Nick instead. And Kat and Holly have been convinced by Jack, by this whole narrative, to want Nick out as well. They are on board. Let's take Nick out. Why not? And he's close to Bella. So Bella, they were already anti-Bella. Now they're also anti-Nick. And Nick is more threatening between Nick and Bella anyway. So let's get Nick out. That's what they want to start pushing at this point. This is when Holly and Kat are going to talk about how Holly is upset. Holly is upset because the guys in the house are always talking about how beautiful Sis is. And Holly's like, I'm right there. I'm standing right there. And they're talking about how beautiful Sis is. And I'm like, hello? Do you know how that makes me feel? And Kat says, Holly, you are a beautiful older woman. Oh, no, I didn't mean it like that. Oh, no. The start of something of... Little did we know how much of a storyline this would end up being throughout the season. In the meantime, Christy is ultimately going to decide against backdooring Kemi, in no small part due to Nick in some ways, and also Nicole. And that means that Kat will be going home. That is the backup plan, that Holly may be losing Kat right away. Not much influence over the situation. She did try to push Nick, but it's not happening. So Christy has decided Kat's going home. However, by a stroke of luck, when she checks in with Sam, Sam weirdly and adamantly wants to save Cliff with the veto. And because he wants to save Cliff with the veto, they need to come up with some kind of alternative target, because if Christy's putting another person on the block, they're the ones that are going to have to go home. And so Sam suggests Ovi, and just like that, Ovi is up on the block, and he is the target for the week. Holly is fine with this. It's not Kat. It wasn't what she wanted, but she thinks it's smart. Take out Ovi. Good. Throughout this, the Black Widows are going to start forming. As we know, the all-female alliance consisting of Jess, Bella, Kemi, and Nicole. Now, as they form, they talk about how they don't trust Kat and Holly. They're not trustworthy. They shouldn't include them in the Black Widow's plan. So that should be really easy, except Jess was involved in the Black Widow's plan, and Bella was, which, let's be real, both of them were going to spill it at some point. But Jess is the one that's going to eventually spill, not eventually, pretty much immediately spill this women's power thing and pitch it to Kat and Holly, who, as Nicole and Kemi suspected, were not on board and did not want to work with the women. In fact, they said, let's target them soon. That's no good. We don't like it. In the meantime, again, still, Holly is growing closer to Jackson. She tells him that he needs to be nicer to people. One of the things, and we'll talk about this when we get to Jackson, one of the things that I was really reminded of was that Jackson has really undergone a transformation, both physically and personality-wise. For as much as we made fun of Jackson for like trying to be more relatable and less of a pompous douchebag, he was a totally different person back in the early weeks. He was ripped and he was aggressive, like real aggressive and mean to people. Like the Jackson of today would be way more subtle about this. It's very strange. It was very strange to go back and watch these feeds. But Holly is telling him, and Holly, I assume, is part of that influence. You need to be nicer to people, and so Jackson starts to be nicer to people. He starts to be nicer to people, and so when Kemi says that she's not targeting Jackson anymore, Holly's like, "You're welcome. That's because I told you to be nice to her." Jackson and Kat, in the meantime, are having issues. Him and Holly are continuing to flirt, and Kat is aggressively flirting, I guess you could say, especially with a little bit of alcohol in the mix. All over Jackson might be a way to describe it, and he is not really into it anymore, and Kat is blaming Holly. She is upset with Holly because she feels like Holly is getting in between her and Jackson, and that relationship is going to start to get a little bit tense. But that's going to be the end of the week. Ovi is evicted. Holly is a vote to evict Ovi. And that's the end of week 1. So in summary, in week 1, Holly was brought into Grateful. The 6 shooters were also formed in this week, tentatively, because of this anti-Nick and Bella stuff that happened. Kat was a part of that. Nick himself was a part of that. Just Nick and Bella being super sketchy in general was a big part of it. Ultimately, a lot of people did end up blaming Bella for the Kemi stuff, but that's why they formed the 6 shooters and excluded Nick and Bella from their initial alliance. So Holly was brought into those alliances. She was not a key component of them, but she was brought in. She did maintain her secret pregame alliance with Kat, which is a bit of a rocky situation at the moment. She does have she like low-key showmances Jackson, pulls him away from Jack a bit. She works on her relationship with both Tommy and Christy and Sis to a degree as well. And that's really what she's doing in the first week. Pretty good stuff from her in general. It's one of her stronger weeks, I think, that she was social enough and likable enough that she got involved in the core alliances. She had good relationships with a few different people in the house. At this point in time, she's targeting Bella, Nick, and Kemi. Not a Kemi fan, Holly is. She's being targeted by nobody. Nobody's coming for Holly at this point in the game, and she's in a pretty good spot. Her influence over the week's outcome, though, pretty negligible. She wanted Bella or Nick to be targeted. She did not really want Ovi to be targeted, or especially didn't want Kat to be targeted, but she wasn't really doing anything to influence the outcome of the week, or anything that she attempted to do was shut down and didn't go anywhere. So no influence over the week, but in general, in a pretty good spot. So heading into week 2, Jack is going to win the next HOH, and immediately Jack wants to backdoor Nick. He's ready to go. Let's do this. He had been pushing for Nick to be backdoored the previous week, so he wants to make this happen. Let's backdoor Nick. Jackson, though, tells him you can't do that. Camp Comeback is in play. David has joined the house. Ovi never left. And so Grateful needs to stick together, man. It's got to happen. Holly is starting to become concerned that her meat shield isn't actually a shield, and that she's more of a target than he is to the women. Now, remember, Holly is targeting the women of Black Widows. In particular, Bella and Kemi, and she's concerned that they're targeting her, and she's concerned that they're not going to target Jackson before her, which is part of the point of being with Jackson. Is this big dude, he's going to be the target ahead of her, but he seems to have a good enough social game that she's concerned that she's going to be the target. So this is when, and this is another thing that surprised me going back and looking at Holly's early game. We talk a lot about how much trash talking of Kemi there was. I forgot just how much. I didn't remember Holly being that big of a part of it, but she's constantly trash talking Kemi, and really a lot of the women, but in particular Kemi. It's ridiculous. I don't understand where this comes from. I completely forgot about this, but this was the conversation between Kat and Holly where they're like, Kemi's the worst. Oh, she's terrible. Did you see what she said? She was calling us pretty. Oh! She's always calling us pretty. How dare she? Oh! Unbelievable. And just constantly trash on Kemi. I don't understand it. Kat is still targeting Bella, and so Holly is as well. But despite this trash talking, this mutual bonding of trashing Kemi, there is still tension building with the Jackson situation as Jackson prepares to, and eventually does, break up with Kat. Look, I gotta be selfish for the first time in my life, and this is for both of our benefits. It's really me taking one for the team, but I'm also being selfish, so it's what we gotta do. And Kat is not pleased, and she blames Holly. She thinks that Holly is the one that got in the middle here and pulled Jackson away from her. She tries to talk with Holly about it, and Holly is just like, I don't have the energy for this, Kat. I just don't. No, I just don't have the energy for you right now. And so that goes on the back burner for a little while. In the meantime, Grateful is going to get together and discuss the plan. The plan is Jack is going to nominate Kemi and Jess. Getting rid of Kemi, and Kat will be used as a pawn for whichever one of the people come down off the block, if they do come down off the block. But Kemi is the main target here. She, dissed his cooking, so she's got to go. As Holly's relationship with Kat deteriorates, though, it does offer some benefit. She starts to socialize more with others in the house. Her relationship with Sis really starts to blossom. She gets even closer with Jackson. She talks more with Tommy, and her social game again starts to expand a bit more in a good way, because it had been shrinking a bit. And that's really going to be the story of Holly's game, is that she's a social enough person. She does well when she's not locked into a couple of people. That we saw that in the first week. However, as she really hones in on relationships, in particular the one with Jackson, as we'll talk about throughout the game, her peripheral vision with relationships really starts to shrink, and she starts to neglect other relationships and focus in on the particular people that she is with. And so in this time that and Kat was a big part of that as well. She really honed in on Kat a lot in the first half of the game, but because she was kind of fighting with Kat, her horizons did expand a bit more this week, and her relationship with Sis got really tight. So Holly does, though, eventually go back and talk with Kat about her relationship with Jackson, and essentially gets the go-ahead from Kat. You're good to engage. Go for it. So, green light on Jackson. In the meantime, Sam is going to win the veto. Grateful agrees. Kemi's done. She's out. Kemi and Nicole do try to work on Jackson and Holly, trying to turn them against Nick and Bella, but before that can really bear any fruit, Cliff Notes are going to be exposed, which really builds momentum toward the end of the week and eliminates any other sort of momentum building moments throughout the week. Holly and Kat are going to fully make up by the end of the week. They say that they have something really valuable in this game, and it's made even better. It's made even more valuable because now everyone assumes that they don't like each other, because they didn't like each other for a good portion of the week. But because they knew each other outside of the house, they can come together, pretend they still don't like each other, separate themselves out, and work the house. So Nick, though, starts to push Nicole to target Holly and Kat. Nick, the relationship between Nick and Bella and Holly has deteriorated rapidly since week one, when Holly wanted to target Nick and Bella. She has not really been working on that relationship ever since, and Nick has kind of caught on to that. He wants to put up Holly and Kat. His target would be Kat, but he wants Holly up on the block next to her. I think he sees a little bit of their relationship, and he thinks that Holly would be a good pawn to put up next to Kat, so he starts pushing that on Nicole. Christy is going to overhear Jackson and Holly talking about a 4, which is the 4 with Jack and Sis. It's not an official 4, it's a very informal 4, but it does set Christy off a bit and makes her a little bit suspicious of Jackson and Holly. This is one of the instigating factors that eventually leads toward the schism that occurs within the 6 shooters between Christy and Jackson and Holly. She was anti-Jack, but Tommy was always there to pull Jack in. Tommy was not there to pull Jackson and Holly in quite as much, and so Christy's vitriol is eventually going to be targeted toward Jackson and Holly of that crew that she feels like she doesn't want to trust too much. Now, Holly does resist a few attempts to flip the vote on Jess to keep Kemi, but ultimately it was a doomed attempt to begin with, and so Kemi will be evicted, and Holly will be a vote to evict her. So in summary, this week, Holly is full-on showmancing Jackson at this point. She manages her relationship with Kat, which is quite rocky, but by the end of the week, she's back on board. She does start to get closer to Sis, but her other relationships are starting to falter, including her relationship with Nick and her relationship with Christy. Holly is targeting at this point Kemi, Bella, and Nick. And Holly is being targeted by Nick indirectly. And through Nick, obviously, Bella to a degree, and potentially Sam. This is her first sense of any kind of danger potentially being put on the block by people in the house. Holly's influence on this week's outcome is that she did turn down an already doomed attempt at a vote flip, but in general, she wasn't really involved too much in the direction of the week. She was just managing her own personal relationships and so forth. So, heading into week 3, Nick is going to win the HOH. Jackson cast a rogue vote during the Kemi eviction, and he is going to try and pin that on Nicole. Holly doesn't have too much involvement in that, apart from the fact that she just knows about it. Nick is going to want to make a move on Jack, but again, can't come back, can't do it. So there's another factor as well, though. Kemi called Nick and Bella out in her eviction speech, and that really freaked Nick and Bella out and really made them pull back into Grateful for support. If there are people outside of Grateful attacking them, then they're going to need Grateful moving forward. So that was another deterrent to flipping on the alliance. So Holly and Jackson at this point are going to start hooking up, and Jackson asks Nick for shower time, to which Nick is like, "Oh yeah, boy, yeah, totally." Cliff and Nicole, at this point in the game, figure out Grateful. They figure it out. They're like, holy crap, it's Jackson, Holly, Jack, Sis, Nick, Bella, Christy, Tommy. Damn it. How do we break this up? That's bad. That's a bad group. What can we do about this? Nicole feels like she's split in the middle of the Nick and Holly divide, and this is why it's relevant to Holly. Now, Nicole has been, as I said, Nick has been pushing Nicole to put Holly on the block, and Nicole feels like she has an okay relationship with Holly because, as I mentioned before, Kemi and Nicole were trying to flip Holly against Nick and Bella, and so Nicole feels in the middle of that. She doesn't know which side to go with. She ultimately decides she's going to make a play on Holly, and so she goes to Holly, she throws Nick under the bus, and cries to Holly, and Holly takes the bait. She says, "Oh yeah, Nick is terrible. We all see it. We're all gunning for him. Don't worry about it, Nicole." Nicole is going to take that information and use it in an attempt to flip Nick right before the nominations. And it almost works, but it backfires. He does not decide to nominate Jack or or Jackson. Those would have been the two he nominated with this information. He thought about it, but he decided against it. And then Tommy recognized that something was wrong. He really dug into the situation. He finds out what happened, that Nicole spilled some information, and he quickly starts to work to scapegoat Nicole, and undeniable happens. The whole situation. Now, despite Jackson and Holly's claims to the contrary, in recent days on the feeds, they were both very, very active participants in the undeniable blow-up. Holly, in fact, was the one to tell Jack to shut the door in Nicole's face. And Jackson, as I mentioned, full of aggressive energy, hitting things, ready to crack people in the mouth right now. F this, F that. Let's go. The whole situation is very, I thought it would be more fun to watch knowing that Nicole survived this and got back at them, and almost everyone in that room was evicted. But no, it was still pretty disgusting, to be honest. Really didn't enjoy it too much. So, everything is getting blamed on Nicole. Holly is disgusted by Nicole. She can't believe she lied to her. Nicole is now the new, that's a Dan Giesling right there. That's a Dan Giesling. She's Vanessa Rousseau. How she lied about her grandmother. We know what happened there. Afterward, Nicole is going to start defending herself with Tommy as a chaperone. And Christy and Tommy eventually decide that they actually believe Nicole and that Bella and Nick were probably in the wrong. Now, it's important to remember Nicole was lying for most of this, or at least a good portion of this. She was actively trying to split Grateful up, and she was relaying information to both sides. Both the things she was saying were the truth, but it was with malicious intent. Ultimately, Christy and Tommy convinced the rest of Six Shooters that what Nicole was saying about Bella and Nick was true, because what she was saying about them was true, and that she probably did not have malicious intent. So Nicole successfully slides out from under that, and Six Shooters decides they're going to keep Nicole and blindside Bella and Nick. Sis, though, not a fan of this plan. Sis was not fully convinced. She wants to stay with Nick. She doesn't want to betray him. She feels like she can be himself around him. She tells this to Holly. Holly tries and fails to reel her back in, but Sis is having none of it. Eventually, Tommy is the one that's going to reel Sis in. He is going to succeed where Holly failed. There's another blow up that happens in the meantime between Kat and Jackson. This time about the diary room and trash talking each other and all of that stuff. Which, of course, means more tension between her and Holly, which eventually gets smoothed over again as they bond by trash talking Kemi and talk about how much they hate Kemi and how Kemi is the most entitled person ever. And she's gonna look so bad to America, Kemi. She's so terrible. And Kat describes that she messed with Kemi's water bottle. Oh, it's going to be so funny. And Holly's like, ah, ha, ha. In the meantime, Kemi's doing literally nothing to these two, other than calling them pretty, I guess. Six Shooters, at this point, wants to ditch Kat. They're done with her. They're out. They're out on her. Jackson is in a fight with her. Jackson wants to dump her. He's already dumped her in one way, and now he wants to dump her strategically as well. And the rest of Six Shooters also want to get rid of her. They don't trust her. She's a wild card. They're not into it. But Holly has a pregame connection with Kat, and she uses that to help save her. She says, look, Kat and I have a lot of mutual friends. She can't betray me. It can't happen. There's a lot of people that we'd be mad at her. So we can trust her. I'm telling you, we can trust Kat. And so they're like, all right, fine. We'll keep Kat around. We'll keep her mostly in the loop. It's at this point that Holly lets Kat know, hey, there's a big alliance. But don't worry, you're not on the hit list, and they're breaking up soon. They're going to target Nick and Bella. Nick and Bella were part of the alliance. It's going to break up the alliance. Boom. This is also when they talk about how much they hate the Camp Comeback people. Those Camp Comeback people, they're like a bunch of animals. They are a bunch of animals. They're so messy, annoying. They're the worst. We hate them. I hope you guys recall that David was probably the cleanest person in that house. I was so surprised at how much trash Holly was talking about these people. Not into it, Holly. Nick, Sam, and Bella want to make a move against Holly at this point. They want to take Holly out. She is their main target right now. She is the person who is putting the least amount of work in with them, and they want to work with Tommy and Christy. So basically, Nick, Sam, and Bella. At this point, Sam has been informed by Bella that Grateful exists, and so they're trying to pull Tommy and Christy away from Jack, Jackson, Bella, or Holly, and Sis, and their target would be Holly. Tommy and Christy, in the meantime, are also getting annoyed with Jackson and Holly because Tommy figured out that Holly told Kat about Grateful. Kat was very bad at hiding the fact that she knew Grateful existed, and Tommy quickly figured it out and went to Holly and was like, did you tell Kat about Grateful? And Holly was like, oh, I think she knew. And so they're not super pleased about that, and that relationship again is going to continue to deteriorate between Christy and the pair of Jackson and Holly. At the end of the week, Cliff is going to be evicted, and Holly will vote to evict him. So, in summary, Holly gives up some information that nearly blows up in her face to Nicole, but instead it blows up in Nicole's face. So she got lucky there. As she really focuses in on Kat and Jackson, Holly's relationship with Sis, Christy, and Tommy does start deteriorating. Her relationship with Bella, Sam, and Nick is really starting to deteriorate to the point where they are now targeting her. She also loses Nicole as a working ally due to the events of Undeniable. Nicole is no longer talking with Holly. And she also gives Kat information that blows up in her face a little bit. So a lot of attempted moves here by Holly. Almost all of them blow back in her face, and she's in a much worse position than she was the week before. At this point in the game, she is targeting Nick, Bella, Sam, and Nicole. Because Nicole, how dare she betray her like that? Holly is being targeted by Nick, Bella, and Sam pretty directly at this point. Her influence on the week's outcome was fairly minor. She had obviously that minor role in the Undeniable blow up, and then was a participant of it. But in terms of the decision to keep Nicole or Cliff, it wasn't really her call. That was more a Christy and Tommy thing. So heading into week 4, Cliff has been evicted, but he's still in the game. Camp Comeback. And so Jackson and Holly tried to tell Cliff, hey, this was all part of the plan. Now, Holly wasn't really involved in any of this, but Jackson has made an alliance with Cliff called the Southerners or something along those lines that Holly is involved with. And so they're trying to do damage control with Cliff because they just voted him out. And they tell him this was all part of the plan. You go win that battle back. It's going to be great. And Cliff is not amused. Get out of here. Cliff does, though, win the battle back. He also goes on to win the HOH. Cliff is in power. It's time for a power shift. Jackson and Holly discuss a plan for Jackson to volunteer as a pawn because they know that Christy has a power that can help save them if they need it. Holly encourages this plan. She tells Jackson to go up on the block as a pawn. Then, in one of the more interesting turn of events during Holly's game, she goes to Kat and says that she's thinking about letting Jackson go, that she thinks maybe he's not really benefiting her game and he should leave. He's going to volunteer for the block, and this may be an opportunity. Kat, though, says, no. Why would you do that? We need him. We can get him later. Don't worry about it. So that idea comes and it goes. Jack and Jackson go up on the block, and Jackson is going to win the veto, which means that Christy can use her power and will use her power, but she doesn't want to use her power, and that's important. So Jackson's going to be pressuring Christy into using it because obviously she should use it, and Kat is very happy. Kat is very happy because this means that Bella's going home. Christy's going to use the power. Bella's going to go home. Great. Holly, though, doesn't want Bella to go home. She would rather Nick go home. She thinks that Nick is the bigger target. So that's what Holly's going to push, but again, unsuccessfully. Holly and Jackson then get into a big fight about having sex on camera. They have not quite figured out the whole situation and what to do about it. And so they get into the big fight. She makes fun of his abs, and he says, how dare you? I would never do that to you. I'm done. No more. I'm going to make the call for us both. I mean, if you don't want to have sex with me on camera, then I just don't know what the point of this is. If you're gonna make fun of my abs and like that, you say you eating disorders and like it's just I just don't understand. No, I'm not talking about it. Nope, I'm done. Please talk to me, Jackson. No talking. It's over. No, Jackson, we need to talk. Please, we need to talk. Don't do this. No, I don't. Nobody makes fun of my abs and gets away with it. They eventually make up, though. After they finally make up, but in the meantime, before they make up, Holly does complain to a few people, to Tommy and to Kat, about what Jackson is doing, and Kat says, "Yeah, he's terrible. You should have known this." Kat is like having that moment where she's like, "Haha, I knew it." But don't worry, we can take him out later. Like, it's gonna be fine. We're gonna work together. It's gonna be great. Kat is very pleased. But then Holly and Jackson make up, and when they do that, Jackson starts talking about how, I've been feeling really good about Kat lately. I'm feeling good about that one. I feel like maybe we should keep her around. Holly's like, whoa, hold on. Just so you know, Jackson, you shouldn't trust Kat. And so for the first time in the game, Holly is going to rat Kat out to Jackson and tell Jackson that he can't trust Kat. Kat is just trying to make him feel comfortable and wants to cut him later. He should be careful around her. So she went from the beginning of the week going to Kat saying, maybe it's time to let Jackson go, to getting into a big fight with him, to, uh-oh, now it's turned around and she is a bit more with Jackson than Kat at this point. Uh-oh. That's how it goes. You got to be very careful with these people. Christy, in the meantime, is pissed at Jackson for trying to strong-arm her into using the power, and she wants to target him and Holly. She says that if Jackson hadn't won this veto, she wouldn't have used the power, and they would have just gotten rid of Jackson. Hands down. So, turns out, was a bit of a must-win for him. So, Kat is going to fan those flames. Kat is now firmly anti-Jackson, does want Jackson gone soon. Now, when she said to Holly, we'll take out Jackson later, she didn't mean super later. She meant soon. And when Holly got into the fight with Jackson, that really accelerated her timeline even more. And so now Kat is really pushing to get Jackson out soon. This will not only help her take out Jackson, but it will also help break up the big alliance. Kat is also going to be talking with Cliff about this as they coordinate their strategies to make sure that Christy and Jackson are against each other. That is part of what Cliff is doing when he makes the deal with Christy. All of that is going down behind the scenes. Kat is also going to try and turn Holly against Jackson, but at this point it's too late, and Holly is now defending Jackson to Kat. Holly confides and insists that Kat is trying to turn her against Jackson, but she thinks that Kat is lying to her, and she's not a fan. Tommy and Sis are going to discuss taking Jackson out, and this split in the 6 shooters is really starting to be exposed a bit as Tommy, Sis, Christy are starting to think about targeting Jackson and Holly, and Holly is a little bit unaware at this point. So Kat and Jackson are getting into another big fight right before Bella is evicted. There was an attempt to flip the vote that Holly and Jackson considered, but ultimately declined, which is important to know heading into the next week. So Bella is evicted. Holly is a vote to evict her. So in summary, week 4, Holly spends a lot of time again on the Kat and Jackson drama. At this point, really just letting a lot of the game pass her by. She's spending so much time and energy into Kat and Jackson in this whole situation that the game is being played around her, and her alliances and allies are starting to move on without her, and start to even in some cases target her and her showmance. Most of her relationships are faltering at this point. Holly is targeting Nick, Sam, and Nicole because Bella is leaving, so that's going to take out one of her targets. She's being targeted by a lot of people, actually. A lot of people are starting to target Jackson heading into this next week. A lot of people from 6 shooters and others as well. She would be a secondary target next to Jackson. She would go on the block with Jackson probably, and if Jackson won the veto, could be in trouble. So not in a great spot anymore. It's really she's come a long way down from where she was in week 1 at this point. Still in an okay spot in the sense that if Jackson didn't win the veto, Jackson would go home and she could probably work her way back in from there, especially with her connection to Kat. But not quite as solid as she was before. Her influence on this week's outcome was basically nothing. She had no influence on the direction of the week. It was all Cliff and Christy and some of the other 6 shooters. So heading into week 5, it's Poison Ivy. Holly is going to win. She doesn't want to win though. She wanted to drop. But Jackson encouraged her to win, which is important because this might have been a must-win for them. He encourages Holly to win over Sis, and Sis is pissed. Sis is pissed. Her relationship with Holly will never be the same from this point. It was already deteriorating, and after Holly wins over Sis by the encouragement of Jackson, Sis is done. Holly does try to counter the perception given off by this whole situation that Jackson encouraged her to win the HOH by saying that this is her HOH week and not Jackson's. She says, "Jackson, you're not going to be sleeping with me upstairs. I'm gonna sleep up there with Christy and Sis." It seems like she is on the right trajectory for her game. She needs to start to develop her relationships with other people again instead of focusing in on Jackson, but that plan is going to be dropped pretty quickly as Jackson moves back upstairs, and those relationships do deteriorate a bit after that initial night of an attempt of trying to be social. In the meantime, Jackson says that he thinks Holly should nominate Nicole because Nick and Sam, that's a bold move. I think that's too bold for you, Holly. That's a move I would make, but not you. You should nominate Nicole. Holly wants Nick gone. She's wanted Nick gone for a while. She thinks he's the most dangerous. She wants Nick out. That relationship has just Never been there. And they've been targeting each other for a while. Christy and Sis are worried because they are against Jackson and Holly. And they're worried that Jackson and Holly are going to realize that they're at the bottom. And if they realize that, then they might not target Nick and Sam. They might target one of them. Holly is essentially in the same position that Nick was in the previous week. Or 2 weeks previous, where Nick didn't realize that he was at the bottom of his alliance, and instead of targeting them, was a dummy and targeted other people, and let his alliance then come and take his showmance the following week. So they're concerned that Holly is going to realize that she's in that position and do the smart thing and target one of them or something along those lines. So Christy's going to put in some work to make sure that Nick and Sam go on the block. The next morning, Jackson is going to make her breakfast. Unbelievable. He is amazing. Jackson, your mama raised you right. Yeah, I like hearing that. Where's my mama? Kat is going to throw Nicole under the bus during Holly's HOH. Kat wants to get Nicole targeted. Kat wants Nicole gone. Now, Cliff's Angels was formed the previous week, and so Kat is going to use Cliff's Angels to throw Nicole under the bus and get Nicole nominated. I still don't know why Kat wanted to do this, but she did. She says to Holly that Nicole does not have y'all's backs, and you know, she's working with this alliance called Cliff's Angels, and you need to be careful, and tries to get Nicole targeted, but to no avail. Christy is going to have the bigger influence, and Holly wants Nick gone anyway, so Nick and Sam are nominated for eviction. At this point, now that she's failed to get Nicole evicted, Kat decides to volunteer for the block if one of Nick or Sam comes down. Kat will go up as a pawn. I mean, you can theoretically, you know, say, oh, she wanted to do that because it would hide her relationship with Holly, but boy, was that a bad move. And it was a bad move on both Kat and Holly's parts. One of the worst weeks for Holly, I think, this HOH week, between you know, not realizing that her alliance has turned on her, doing the same thing that Nick did, and then it would be like if Nick put Sam on the block as the back door instead of Nicole. So Kat volunteers, Holly agrees, and despite Kat and Holly's attempts to pin it on, so there's been some rumblings going on that there was an attempted vote flip last week to save Bella, and it's all getting pinned on Nicole. And this is part of what Kat's doing. She's blaming Nicole. She's saying Nicole is terrible. Nicole should be targeted. And Holly is going along with that, saying that it was all Nicole. But despite their attempts to pin it on Nicole, Christy and the rest of the six shooters do think that Jackson and Holly were considering flipping the vote on Jack last week, and they're just trying to blame Nicole, just like Nick and Bella did. And really, again, parallels the Nick and Bella week in many, many ways. So they are going to target Jackson and Holly very soon. Holly has been acting weird lately. They don't trust her. Christy says that she wants to keep Sam, use him to go after Holly next week, and she's even willing to take the shot at Holly and Jackson next week if she needs to. In the meantime, Cliff has been working Holly and Jackson since last week. Basically, when they tried to convince him that they voted him out for a reason, he was having none of it, but he pretended to them that he was okay with it. He then won the HOH. He used Jackson's plan to nominate him as a pawn. Said, look, you volunteered. I don't want you to go, though. You're not my target. Once Jackson won the veto and Cliff made the deal with Christy, Cliff got information from Christy that she was anti-Jackson. She also learned that Jackson was the rogue vote during the Nicole week. and held on to that information, which will become very relevant in the following week, at the end of this week. And so he has been working, as I said, behind the scenes with Kat to drive a wedge between Christy and Jackson, using the information that both of them have from Christy and from Jackson, working both ends of that spectrum. And so at this point in time, Holly and Jackson feel very good about both Cliff and Kat. They want to target Nicole after they get rid of Nick and Sam. That's their plan, but they want to work with Cliff. Sam says that Sam keeps trying to pitch to Holly that he wants to work with her and that he wants to go after Christy, and Holly is tempted by the offer, but and wants it to happen because she wants Sam to stay, but Nick is going to win the veto, which means that Sam has to go. So after Nick wins the veto, Holly is very upset. She alludes to the six shooter's relationship with Nick as an abusive one. She says that we keep taking Nick back, but then he betrays us, he ruins it, and I just want to make sure it doesn't happen again. I don't want Nick to be able to get back in. I don't want that to happen. Cliff has been planting seeds with Jackson and Holly about Christy for a long time. Again, since the week before, they felt really good about Cliff. He's been dropping hints that Christy is not to be trusted, and it's finally starting to get to Jackson. Jackson is the one that initially starts to become a little bit nervous about Christy. He says that he ends up telling Jack with Holly, him and Holly confide in Jack that they're working with Cliff and that he wants Cliff to target Christy, and that Cliff is a good option of somebody to target Christy, and that Jack should try to get in with Cliff as well. Holly starts to consider even keeping Sam around and targeting Nicole instead. If she backdoors Nicole, then she can keep Sam around and Sam can go after Christy. Jack, though, pushes back. He says, we shouldn't target Nicole. Sam needs to go. He's too dangerous. You can't take that risk. Obviously, we know Jack is more loyal to Tommy. Jack is going to run this information to Tommy, and Jackson and Holly are outed. So Tommy and Christy are super sketched out. They decide they need to take out Sam no matter who Holly puts up, even if they have to vote against Holly's wishes. Again, continuing to parallel the Nick week. Tommy at this point says he is ready to take shots. They are going after Jackson and Holly. Christy agrees. Let's go. The thing has been thrown. It's wartime. Kat and Holly agree that Kat is okay with going on the block. That is an option for Holly. It will be great because it will hide their relationship. That didn't work out. Kat wants to tell Christy about Cliff's Angels, but Holly's like, no! Holly says, we have to protect Cliff. Cliff is important. Sis says that she has been Sis is pushing for Nicole to go because Sis wants to save Sam because Sis has a good relationship with Sam. And Holly actually is concerned about that because she is concerned about Sis because Sis has been flirting with Jackson. I saw that's a lot to get through in one little blurb there, but basically over the last week, again, Sis was pissed at Holly for even winning this HOH, so even though I didn't really see this too much, Sis has been flirting, quote unquote, with Jackson, and Holly is not a fan of it. She says she's shameless and she doesn't like it, so now she's concerned about Sis, and the fact that Sis is pushing to get Nicole out means that Holly doesn't really want to do it as much anymore because she's worried that Sis is just doing that to keep Sam around and that Sam would actually be a number for Sis and not for Holly. A lot of this week and the outcome of it is riding on Holly and Sis and Holly's concern about Sis. Who's going to pick Sis over her? So that's really her primary motivation from this point forward. Holly says that Christy is the big threat. That she's worried that Christy is going to choose Sis over her. But Holly changes her mind when she talks to Nicole. It's not a great conversation. She decides she does want Nicole out. This time, Christy pushes back hard, and Tommy gives an assist. They talk her down. They convince her not to go after Nicole. But after they get done with that conversation, they decide just do that. This is it. She's trying to get Nicole out. She's trying to make a move. We need to go after them. They talk about that with Sis. Sis runs her mouth. Kat overhears. Kat is going to run it back to Holly. Holly then blames Sis because she's the one flirting with Jackson. They were just talking with her. Jackson ends up confronting Tommy and Christy about it, and they agree that they blame Sis. It was all Sis's fault. We weren't talking any crap. It was all Sis. Which this was a complicated mess of events here, but the bottom line is that Jackson and Christy are now more angry with Sis than with Christy and Tommy. Christy and Tommy are able to slide by blame free. Holly does, and that also means that Kat will end up going on the block as the pawn. And Sis tries to clear things up and blame Christy at this point, unsuccessful. Six shooters have their final dying meeting. Again, an unsuccessful one. Jackson and Holly are brought into Tommy and Christy's blame shifting maneuvers. They want to get Christy on board with the anti-cis agenda. So their goal is that they want to pull Tommy and Christy back in and turn them against cis. The mistake that everyone is making in the first half of the game is that they all think they can pull Tommy and Christy, and Jackson and Holly, even though they were initially thinking, catching on to what Christy was doing, are now convinced by Christy and Tommy that they should work with them and that it's all Sis's fault. They talk a lot about how Sis is flirting with Jackson. Jackson talks about how, yes, Sis isn't distant with me. Oh, she's shameless. Lots of now Kemi's gone, so now there's a lot of cis trash talking between Kat and Holly. She is the new person to take the brunt of this. She starts working very hard to get back into the group, into six shooters. Sam is then going to make his pitch to Jackson. Now, just as it looks like the group is getting back together, it looks like that Cliff and Kat's work is not going to pay off because Tommy and Christy are too good and they reeled Jackson and Holly back in. Sam makes a play. He pitches to Jackson, exposing some of what Christy was saying the week before when she didn't want to use her power during Cliff's HOH, and it matches with what Cliff and Kat have been telling them, and Jackson buys it, and he wants to flip the vote to save Sam. Problem is, Holly can't flip the vote to save Sam because Kat's on the other side. So they can't do it. It sucks, but they can't do it. And also, do we really believe this? Are we sure? So Holly goes to Cliff, and Holly wants to know from Cliff, is this stuff true? What do you have? What can you tell me? We've been talking about working together. Let's put it all on the table here. And Cliff confirms the information from Sam. He also drops that Christy told him that Jackson was the rogue vote. He basically spills everything that he has on Christy, and it clicks for Holly as well. Holly now brings it back to Jackson, and they say, that's it. It's over. Six shooters is done. We need to gather the troops. We need to go after Christy. That's it. So Jackson goes to work. He brings in Jack. He lets Jack know what's going on. But again, Jack, of course, as we know, was the wrong person to trust. Jack is going to spill the beans about everything that Jackson tried to tell him to Tommy, including the fact that Kat and Holly know each other. No! They know each other! So Tommy and Jack tried to flip the votes to get rid of Kat now that they know that Kat and Holly know each other. But Holly catches them in the act and gets to work. She convinces them, and more importantly, Christy, that she does not know Kat and that she's loyal to the group. Don't do this. Christy makes the call. We're putting a stop to this vote flip. Kat is saved. Sam is evicted on Holly's HOH. And that was day 44. So, in summary this week, this was a potentially necessary HOH win on Holly's part that she didn't even want to win, but she did kind of need to. But this HOH week was just one disastrous decision after another. That she then at the very last minute managed to pull herself out of the fire with an excellent clutch play. It's really like just the decision to target Nick and Sam, not realizing that her allies have turned on her. It was the same thing Nick did. It was a terrible decision. Then she decides to put Kat on the block, her closest ally apart from Jackson. Terrible decision. Then she is obvious about, she and Jackson are too obvious about the fact that they are flipping against Christy. Their secret gets leaked, and the vote nearly flips on Kat, which would have been just absolutely terrible for her game. It was nearly she just almost completely trashed her entire game in 1 week. But at the last second saves it with the clutch play, and basically wipes the slate clean. A week's worth of terrible moves and decision making, it wipes clean by one clutch play at the end of the week. You have to give her a lot of credit for that. I think this is by far her finest moment in the game. The fact that she managed to save Kat at the end of the week, but it was also a lot of her lowest moments in the game. She wouldn't have needed to do that if she had made more correct decisions earlier in the week. If she hadn't put herself in such a hole, she wouldn't have needed to climb out of it so dramatically. So at this point in the game, Holly is targeting Nick, Sis, Christy, and Jack. She is against Christy for sure, against Sis, against Nick, and against Jack. She's being targeted by nobody. Just like that. Clean slate. She convinced the 6-shooters not to go after her. The other people aren't going after her. So she's fine for a week. And Holly's influence on the week was, obviously, she was HOH. She was basically tossed around by the others in the house. Barely any of these decisions were her own. She ended up nominating her closest ally and another potential ally. And then, again, almost disaster, but she did barely escape, and it all worked out in the end. So influence, she was definitely in charge of a lot of decisions, but those decisions were basically made by other people in a lot of ways. But she was the key factor in keeping Kat around after a potential flip. So that is important to note as well. So heading into week 6, Jess is going to win the HOH, and Holly is going to continue to do her damage control tour, convincing the 6-shooters that she's on their side. However, she kind of quickly realizes that it's not necessary, and she gives up after about a day and starts just hanging out in the HOH room. Kat tries to tell Holly that she needs to drop Jackson, and Holly says no. She defends Jackson. Cliff and Kat encourage Jess to take a shot at Jack while keeping Holly and Jackson safe, and that is what Jess is going to do. Kat and Holly still hate Sis, and she is their next target at this point. Shameless, flirting. People call her beautiful, vapid. She just wants to be an influencer. She's dumb. Christy starts to realize after Holly has given up on damage control that she's been had. She made a mistake. She shouldn't have kept Kat. Shouldn't have trusted Holly. Holly's now spending all of her time in the HOH. Whoops. Holly is working on her relationships with the other side of the house. This is one of her better weeks. She's working on Nicole and Jess in particular. She's really setting herself up in a better spot than she was before. She's still being targeted by the other side as they realize what's going on, but she is a little bit insulated in the fact that she has both Kat and Jackson as targets in front of her. Holly, at this point, this is when we see a bit of a shift. She says, I was never comfortable with that other side. I've always been a cool kid, but I've never really felt comfortable being a cool kid. I feel more comfortable with the other sides of things, and I didn't like it when they were being mean. So this is better. I am an underdog, really, if you think about it. And so this is really the better space for me. Which we all laughed at the time, but I really had forgotten a lot of what she had done before. I guess it worked in some ways. Anyway, she's still skeptical of Nick, even though she's now theoretically on the same side as him. The 6 shooters are still targeting Jackson, Holly, and Kat the following week. Holly is going to start to change her mind about Sis, despite Kat's continuing trash talk. Holly at this point would rather target Christy, as Christy becomes more aggressive against Holly as she realizes that Holly is against her. She also wants Tommy gone after Christy, so it's Christy and then Tommy, according to Holly. However, Tommy is going to throw a Hail Mary pass to Jackson and Holly at the end of the week, tries to reconnect with them, and succeeds dramatically. It lands, and they bond heavily. He says that he was not a part of any of the, he did not mean to be a part of any of the stuff that went down. He still loves them a lot, and he wants to work with them, and he will not put them on the block. After he leaves, Jackson and Holly talk about how much they love him and how much they want to work with him, and so he is not going to be their target moving forward. Holly now wants to put up Nick and Christy on the block. That's who she wants to target next. She talks with Kat about whether she should side with Tommy or with Cliff's Angels. She's not sure which way to go. And she doesn't really make a call yet. Kat wants to put up Jackson and Holly agrees that that's a good idea, that Jackson would be a great pawn to use for Kat. So Jack is evicted. Holly is a vote to evict him. And in summary for week 6 here, Holly is going to recover her position. But then she swiftly loses it as her cover is immediately blown with Jackson and Jack on the block. She is going to use this opportunity to bond with Cliff's Angels, and Tommy reconnects with her and Jackson. So that's where she's shifting toward here, but she is still being targeted by the rest of the 6 shooters, or what remains of them. At this point in time, she's targeting Nick and Christy. She's being targeted by Sis, Nick, and Christy. But she did, again, reconnect with Tommy, which will be vital to her survival in the following week. She was a major player this week. She was a big target. She is a big target moving forward, but she has made some individual relationships that will end up keeping her safe the following week. So good week overall for Holly, despite still being a target. Heading into week 7, we have Tommy winning the HOH. The only one of the 6 shooters that will keep her safe. So, Lots of people being targeted. Sis wants Cliff gone because Tommy immediately says he's not putting up Jackson and Holly. So there's a scatter. Sis wants Cliff gone. She's pissed at him for turning down the Jack deal. Christy wants Kat gone, and Tommy decides that Kat does need to go. She is the best person to take out. It disarms Jackson and Holly. It gets rid of the link between Jackson and Holly and the rest of Cliff's Angels, which he doesn't know are called Cliff's Angels. And so that's going to be Tommy's plan to take Kat out of the game. We then get to the field trip, which saw Christy, Sis, and Jackson put on the field trip. And the possibility of Christy going on the block looms over them. Jackson wants to take the shot. If Christy goes up on the block, let's vote her out. Let's take her out of the game. Boom. I don't want to work with the 5 anymore. I want to move on with the other side. Let's do it. Holly, though, having thought about it, has decided, no, I don't really want to do that. I don't want to turn on Tommy. I want to continue to work with Tommy. I'd rather go with that side. So Holly is not on board. Kat also tries to convince Holly to evict Christy, and also fails. Holly is not on board to evict Christy. So Nick, at this point, wants to win the veto and get Holly put on the block. He is still after Holly. He would love for Holly to be on the block. He would want to take Cliff down. He works on Nicole to get her against Holly. Now, Nicole wasn't really with Holly, but there's a lot of information against Holly when it comes to Nicole, because Holly was really heavily considering taking Nicole out during her HOH week. So, even though Holly has been bonding with Nicole, there's a lot of work to make sure that Nicole is against Holly from Nick, and then from Christy and Tommy and the rest of them. They all are ratting Holly out as having wanted to target Nicole on her HOH week. Holly did not come clean about that to Nicole, and so this is actually going to work pretty well. Nicole is going to be flipped against Holly throughout this week. And Kat is going to let Holly know about that. Kat is like, oh, you can't trust Nicole. Do not trust Nicole. Nicole is not with you. Kat continues to be anti-Nicole. And just 1 week later, in fact, no, not just 1 week later, this same week, she's going to pretend that she was more loyal to Nicole than Holly. Wow. Unbelievable how blatantly lying that was. Holly tells Jackson we can't trust Nicole. Nicole is on their naughty list. Tommy, though, is going to win the veto. He's going to use it on Christy, and that means that it's going to come down to Cliff and Kat. Jackson wants to keep Cliff. He doesn't want to keep Kat. He wants to keep Cliff in the game. He thinks Cliff is more valuable for their game. Holly says, I agree with you, but I can't. I can't evict Kat. So Holly and Kat feel pretty confident that Cliff is going to go. Holly and Jackson try to take a bit of a back seat for the week because they feel like it's going to go smoothly if they don't interfere. Not the case, though. Nicole is going to try and make a plan to get Holly on the block. Again, she's been flipped against Holly at this point, and she wants to save both Kat and Cliff. Kat blocks the plan, which sets Nicole off, makes her even more skeptical of Kat. Jackson and Holly agree that they need to work with the six again. As they're sitting back and they're expecting Cliff to be evicted, they agree that it's time to go back to the six, go back to Tommy and Christy, and work with them. Jackson really doesn't want to do it, but he agrees with Holly finally that they have no choice. They have to go in that direction. However, it becomes clear to them pretty soon that the six are not evicting Cliff. They are actually evicting Kat, and that's no good. That means, we can't work with them. Crap. So Kat and Holly try to come up with some plans to save Kat, including trying to make an alliance with some of the Cliff's Angels people, but they're called Cliff's Angels for a reason, and that's not going to work very well. Holly starts campaigning hard with the six to try and save Kat, but that only sketches people out more. Why are you campaigning to keep Kat? Kat's pitch is that she's going to go after Jackson. And Kat is going to continue to try to target, say that she's targeting Jackson, but nobody really believes her. People are becoming more and more convinced that it was actually true, that Kat did know Holly. So it's not working, and Kat is starting to circle the drain here. The target list now is that Jackson is the next target for basically everyone in the house, followed by Holly, and then Jess. Those are the next three targets. Jackson and Holly will be going up on the block next week. The new six deal is made between Nick, Tommy, Christy, Sis, Cliff, and Nicole. They're all going after Jackson and Holly. Holly wants to target Nick and Nicole next week. That's her plan. She thinks she's been replaced by Nick and Nicole. She still wants to work with Tommy and Christy to some degree, and so if Kat leaves, then Nick and Nicole will be her targets the following week. Jackson would want to backdoor Christy, but Holly's not as much on board here. Cliff is going to throw Holly and Jackson all the way under the bus in order to make sure that he is going to stay this week. Holly tries to do the same thing to Cliff, but unsuccessfully. Nick is then going to make a deal with Jackson and Holly to cover himself, and this becomes important. It's much more a deal with Jackson than it is with Holly. He is after Holly, going to keep Jackson safe. So Holly is now a bit more of a target than even Jackson in some instances, and is in a lot of danger heading into the following week. Then we get the whole situation where Nicole feels bad about the deal, spills it to Jess, who tells Holly. Chaos ensues. You guys know what happened here. You listened to the updates. You watched the episode. Lots of things go down, but the basics, the underlying thing here is that Holly now knows that the entire house is coming for her. Tommy does damage control the next day. Cliff does damage control. Sis does damage. And then we see Kat evicted. Holly did vote to evict her, though it was quite reluctantly. So in summary here for week 7, it's a very, very bad week for Holly. Her mistakes from the previous week are coming back to haunt her, even as her successes do end up saving her from eviction. The week where she was HOH really messed her up, but she did manage to pull it out of the fire. Then the next week, she was building things up only to watch them crash down again, and again, only to be saved by her relationship with Tommy when he threw that Hail Mary. Tommy played the week extremely well. He completely disarmed her and Jackson, covered his bases, stayed in good with both Holly and Jackson, took out their closest ally, and separated them from Cliff's Angels, which just really put Holly in a no-win position, exactly where Tommy wanted her. And with Kat gone, Holly has lost her entire position in the game. It's now win or die for Holly. She has lost everything, and she's got nowhere to go except to win and stay safe. And from this point forward, Holly has considerably less influence and has a much worse read on the house without having Kat there to help give her information about where things stand. Kat was definitely not exactly the strongest strategic mind and partner, but having that connection there that she could rely on, that was part of another side of the house, giving her information, was really helping Holly stay, even though she wasn't necessarily influencing the outcome of the weeks. It was helping her stay relatively safe in her position because she knew where things were. And now that Kat is gone, that is going to be gone as well. And Holly is going to really struggle for the rest of the game to grasp onto anything in the next few weeks here. So Jackson in week 8 is going to win a must-win HOH for himself and Holly. And just like that, she survives. She's safe. He wants to target Christy and Sis. Holly disagrees. She wants to target Nick. But Jackson is going to get his way. Christy and Sis are going to go on the block. And Holly will be pushing to get Nick up and evicted, and for them to reunite with Christy all week long. That is Holly's goal. Holly wants to save Christy this week. She wants to get Nick evicted if possible. I'm not going to mention every instance of when she tries to make this happen, but she is trying to make it happen in almost every conversation she has with Jackson for the entire week. She wants Christy to stay. Cliff is going to be working on Jackson. Now, Cliff had made a deal to target Jackson, but Cliff smartly blames the other side for it and says that I did what I had to do to survive, but now that I have survived, it was a 1-week deal. You won the HOH. Now I want to work with you. Cliff is going to be the first one in to Jackson and Holly and make sure that he is safe with them as they are in power. Tommy is going to try to work on them later in the week, but by then it's too late. Cliff has already worked his way in, and with Cliff comes Nicole. Reluctantly, but he does drag her in as well and says, hey, I want to bring Nicole with me. I want Nicole to be safe with us. The four of them discuss working together. They don't trust Nicole, but they do trust Cliff, and so they're willing to be okay with Nicole for now because Cliff vouches for her, and that 4 is going to start to come together in this week here, week 8. Cliff tells us when he talks to the cameras that he is just using Holly and Jackson to get further in the game. He knows that they're doing the same with him, but he'll see where this goes. He fully expects that one of them will be picked off ahead of him and Nicole at some point in the future, but they'll see what happens. Jackson is then going to win the veto. And that means that Christy and Sis are going to stay on the block despite Holly's urging to try to get Nick put up and evicted. Holly is also... So the first thing that happens after Jackson wins the veto is that Baywatch happens. And after Baywatch happens, Sis got pissed. Now, Christy got pissed, and Christy got Sis all worked up as well, and so Sis was really pissed at Holly. And remember that scene where Holly comes into the RV room and Sis is like, oh, she's so fake, I just can't be fake in this game. And so this rift between Sis and Holly is reopened, and Holly actually tries to convince Jackson to take out Sis, to use the veto, to not use the veto and get Sis evicted. Not to mention the fact that she also wants Christy to stay. But, you know, Tommy convinces them. Tommy goes and works on them. And Tommy is very effective with Holly. Tommy convinces Holly that everyone is good. Christy is good. Sis is good. We can make it. Everyone individually is going to be good. And so we should not take out any of those people. And Tommy is so convincing that Holly does a complete 180 and now decides that she does not want to win the next HOH. She wants to throw it. She's now working with Cliff and Nicole to a degree. She's now in good with Tommy, Christy, Sis. She's good. She doesn't want to win the next HOH. She wants to throw it. In the meantime, Tommy and Nick are going to discuss how Holly is their next target over Jackson. Sis makes a terrible pitch to stay to Holly. Really terrible pitch to stay. Christy makes a much better pitch to stay and puts Holly in tears, and they cry together. And Holly says to Christy that this is not the decision she would have made and that she wishes that Christy could stay. Tommy also makes a final pitch to keep Christy and take out somebody else. He says that we should keep Christy around, and then it will be us, myself, Sis, Christy, you, Jackson, and Nick would be our sixth. And so what will happen is that you will use the veto. We'll put up Cliff, Nicole, Jess, whoever, and we'll take them out. Holly is convinced. Again, basically anything Tommy does is going to work on Holly for the rest of the season. She wants to do it. She wants to do this pitch. She's on board. Jackson says, no. No. She's like, but come on. What if we take out Nick, though? Like, this is the opportunity to get rid of Nick. Christy shouldn't go. We should take out Nick. Nick is my white whale, Jackson. He goes, no. He's, but Jackson, I don't want to betray Tommy. I don't want to do that to Tommy. And Jackson goes, no. So the no's have it, and Christy will be evicted until Taco Tuesday. You guys know what happened on Taco Tuesday. We've been through this a bunch of times. But basically, Holly is going to use Taco Tuesday to continue to push for Christy to stay. This is her second round. Jackson, we have to keep Christy. You saw what happened. We need Christy to go after Nick. She also uses the information from Sis's terrible pitch. Sis is coming for you. She's going to work with me. We had an alliance, but she's coming for you. Christy will not. Christy will offer us the world. Christy does offer them the world. Jackson finally relents and says, yes. Okay. So they decide to keep Christy, which ironically forces Tommy to scramble. And massively so. He tries to get Christy and Nick reunited. Christy actually tries to instigate it herself. And Christy and Nick actually make preliminary peace before the following HOH. Only further proving that this was a terrible decision on Jackson and Holly's part to keep Christy around. Sis is, in fact, evicted. Holly is a vote to evict her. So in summary here for week 8, Holly is going to spearhead this really boneheaded move to keep Christy around. It puts her and Jackson in a terrible position heading into the following week. She did not realize the position she was in and wanted to throw this HOH, which would have basically led to her eviction if she had succeeded in throwing it. So Holly is targeting Nick at this point. She's being targeted by Christy, Tommy, and Nick. And she had complete control of this week. Just made terrible decisions with it, in my opinion. Now, to make a point on this, week 9, Holly is going to win this HOH. But she had every intention of throwing this HOH. It was a crapshoot. It was supposed to be questions. She was not going to win the questions. She had no intention of winning the questions, but instead it was a prank, and it turned out it was a crapshoot. She just rolled a ball, and it happened to go, and she was like, oh crap, I won. Didn't want to win. Here's the thing, though. If Holly does not win this HOH, and either Christy, Tommy, or Nick do win this HOH, Holly is almost as sure as we can be, going to be the person that leaves this week, because Jackson ends up winning the veto. Even if she wasn't the target over Jackson initially, she definitely would have been remaining on the block after Jackson won the veto to save himself, and she would have been going home. So very inadvertently saving her own life in the game by accidentally winning this HOH. She didn't want it, but she got it. So she wants to put up Nick and Christy. That's what she wants to do. Christy would be the pawn. She wants to cash in on Christy's offer to be a pawn. She tells Christy that she's going up on the block. Christy is not pleased. Holly is not pleased that Christy was not pleased. So, that relationship is just immediately blown up, especially on Christy's end. Holly is going to be buying into what Christy is selling a little bit later in the week, but that was, if there was any further confirmation needed that this relationship was not going to work out, it just immediately happens. Holly actually decides to backdoor Nick, and so her plan is that she's actually going to put up Jess next to Christy. Jess and Christy are going to go up on the block, which was another probably bad decision. But America's Prankster was revealed, and instead of actually hurting Holly, it ends up helping her in a lot of ways. She is, though she is annoyed that she already told Christy that she would go up, because now she doesn't have to put Christy up. Instead, she's just going to put Nick on the block. Cliff is going to continue to push for a final four between himself, Nicole, Holly, and Jackson. Holly is on board. They're starting to trust Nicole a little bit more as Cliff encourages them to bring her in. They still don't trust her fully, but they do trust Cliff, so it's working out. Jackson is going to instigate a confrontation between Nick and Christy because they both ratted each other out when it came to that preliminary peace effort that they were going to make prior to the HOH. They weren't actually going to go after each other. And so they get into a bit of a fight there, but it doesn't really have much impact. Nick is going to end up nominating Christy for eviction because he is America's Prankster. Holly is going to put up Nick for eviction. Jackson is going to win the veto, and just like that, Nick is a goner. During the veto competition, Holly gets called an old buzzard, which is going to lead to more spiraling in the future. She wants Nick gone. Jackson's like, what if we took Jess out, though? Holly says, no, it has to be Nick. He's like, okay. Nick makes an anti-Cliff pitch. Holly does not like it. We're not anti-Cliff in this house. They are going to make their final four official with with Nicole and Cliff. This is when Holly does her song, which probably the worst game move of her season, which is obviously a joke, but let's be real. Don't do the song. Nicole is going to tell them that they can't trust Tommy. They do consider targeting him, but at the end of the day, they do trust him and they don't want to be the ones to put him up. So Jackson does not want to throw the HOH, or does not want to win the next HOH. There's a lot of fighting between Jackson and Holly that happens this week. At the end of the week, Nick is going to make his condom pitch. Doesn't work. This is when Jackson and Holly agree that they're in an amazing spot. Oh! We play this game so well. We're so low-key in the shadows. We're playing both sides. Tommy and Christy aren't targeting us. Nicole and Cliff aren't targeting us. We're getting rid of Nick, who definitely would be targeting us. Jess isn't targeting us. We're so good at this game. We're amazing players. We're going to throw the F out of these HOH competitions. Oh, we're so good. Christy and Tommy continue to play up that they're with them, but in secret are actually, of course, targeting them. So Nick is going to be evicted. And in summary here, Holly is going to evict a big threat. And I won't say it was a mistake per se, but Nick would have been willing to work with them moving forward. And they do believe in Christy and Tommy as people who aren't coming for them, despite the fact that Christy and Tommy are coming for them. And it might have been more prudent to evict Christy here instead of Nick, because Christy was going to come after them. Nick would not have. Ultimately, it's not going to matter too much, though, and taking out Nick, arguably not a mistake because he was good enough at competitions to potentially beat Jackson, though that was not really the reason to take him out too much. So ultimately, taking out Nick, it was an okay move, but they are putting themselves in a bad position. They're believing they're in a much better position than they are, and it really leaves them open to being targeted here moving forward. They also make a final four with Cliff and Nicole this week. Holly is targeting Christy and Jess. Holly is being targeted by Tommy and Christy, and she did have control over the outcome of this week as the HOH. Week 10. Jackson is going to win this HOH. He does so to protect Cliff and Nicole, but actually inadvertently protects himself and Holly. This is the second week in a row that they inadvertently are going to save themselves from eviction. It's actually potentially the third week if you count Holly's Poison Ivy win, which was also not intended to save themselves, but might have actually saved themselves. A lot of their wins were in situations where they might have needed to win, and a lot of them were in situations where they definitely needed to win, though that was not necessarily in a row because Tommy's was in the middle of that. So Jackson wants to put up Christy and Jess. He wants to take Jess out. Holly disagrees with this plan. She wants Christy out over Jess. Holly is concerned because Tommy wants to talk more, and she doesn't want to lie to Tommy. She doesn't want to betray Tommy. She doesn't want to put Tommy up. She loves Tommy. She doesn't want to betray Tommy. If he talks to her more, then she's going to have to lie to him. She doesn't want to lie to Tommy. She loves Tommy. It's not fair to Tommy. This is when Holly starts to worry about her image more. She's talking a lot about how she is much more conservative than she seems. She is not the girl you bring home from the bar. Jackson. Effing asshole. Big fight ensues, as we remember. Nicole is going to get Holly on board with the pitch to keep Jess and get rid of Christy prior to the veto. That Holly is going to pitch hard to get rid of Christy over Jess here, which actually would have been terrible for Jackson and Holly's games in a way that they did not realize. But it doesn't matter because Tommy is going to end up winning the veto and cuts that discussion short as he is going to use it on Christy, forcing Cliff on the block, meaning that there can be no vote flip to be had. Nicole and Cliff, though, are going to start working on Tommy and Christy. Holly and Jackson are busy fighting for much of the week this week and basically leave the game to be dealt with the rest of the people. And so Nicole and Cliff are working on Tommy and Christy to make sure that Tommy and Christy are not targeting them and that they are in fact targeting Jackson and Holly. They are exposing Jackson and Holly as middlemen, affirming that they are not the targets, and basically the entire house is now against Jackson and Holly, or at least the entire house apart from Cliff and Nicole. Cliff and Nicole, in the meantime, are going to discuss which pair they want to side with in the upcoming double eviction. Cliff thinks that sticking with Jackson and Holly is best because there are mental comps coming and they won't need to break any deals to do this. And he is more concerned with Christy and Tommy when it comes to mental comps than Jackson and Holly, so it just makes more sense to go with Jackson and Holly. Little does Cliff know that this is going to be a record-breaking physical competition heavy season. So Jackson and Holly finally stop fighting and agree they're definitely throwing the next HOH, maybe the next two HOHs. So Jackson and Holly would prefer to see Christy go over Tommy. They talk to Cliff about it. Cliff agrees Christy is the right person to go. Nicole would kind of prefer Tommy, but she doesn't have a big preference. Holly does get really upset when she finally learns from Cliff that Christy and Tommy are against them. They're finally coming to realize that they are in a bad position, that Christy and Tommy have been against them perhaps for a long time, and they head into the double eviction, evicting Jess and in some danger. So, in summary here, Holly did want Christy evicted, but Jess is the one that's going to go. She spends most of the week fighting with Jackson, letting the game be played around her. She's targeting Christy. She's being targeted by Christy and Tommy, and she has just a minor influence on the week overall. It's mostly Jackson's call here. If Holly had her way, Christy would have been the one to go, which would have actually screwed them in the double, as Nicole is going to win. And if Jess was still in the game, Nicole definitely would have targeted Jackson and Holly, which would have been bad for, obviously, Jackson and Holly. So, heading into week 11, Nicole does win in the double. She takes out Christy. Holly thinks that Tommy won't come for them after Christy leaves. That they've been good people in this game, and that's why they're doing well. That's why Nicole chose us, because we're good people. We're good people. Stick to our word. Honorable. Jackson's going to win the following HOH. He's going to be targeting Tommy. Holly is trash talking Christy to Tommy when Tommy finally reveals to Holly and Jackson that he knew her. She apologizes. At this point, there's not a ton of strategizing left to do, so it's just down to the competitions, and Nicole is going to win that veto. Meaning that Holly is going to go up on the block, which she did not realize was a possibility until Jackson told her after Nicole won the veto, and she's now freaking out that she might go home. What does she do about it? Nothing. Nicole is going to start to consider evicting Holly, and instead of Holly working on Nicole, Holly is going to be getting into big fights with Jackson about the challenge. In the meantime, Tommy is working on Nicole, and Nicole decides that she does want to keep Tommy around and get rid of Holly. He tells Cliff and Nicole about his connection to Christy, and they decide they are going to keep him. Holly is waiting until Wednesday after Tommy to campaign to Cliff and Nicole. She makes that's when she's going to unleash her big campaign. After Tommy does his stuff, she's going to come in, she's going to slam the hammer down, she's going to stay. So Cliff and Nicole decide they are keeping Tommy 100%. Here we go. Time for Holly's pitch. I just feel like it's best if I stay because I want to be a role model to women, and I don't think it's fair that if I leave this way, and I don't know, I just feel like you shouldn't do this. She tries to lay on the guilt, and it really doesn't work. Very, very bad campaigning from her. Her head has been out of the game for a while at this point. There's all this talk about the challenge. There's all this talk about all this stuff. It didn't work. And Cliff and Nicole are, in fact, going to be evicting her. However, by the grace of Jackson and eavesdropping, Jackson hears Tommy's pitch, and he pulls off his eavesdropping play. We saw this play out. He uses Tommy's pitch that he overheard to convince Cliff and Nicole that Tommy might not be as on the up and up as they might think. Holly had no part in this. Jackson informs her about it afterward, and she didn't even want him to do it. She said, "Why? No, I don't like that. That's mean to Tommy. You shouldn't do this tomorrow." But Jackson says, "I'm not going to just sit back and let you leave." So he continues to try to save Holly. We get into the big blow up that happened that Thursday. And even though Jackson was not the most convincing in terms of convincing both Nicole and Cliff that Tommy did these things, it did leave an opening similar to Taco Tuesday for Cliff to come in and convince Nicole that they should keep Holly and that Tommy should be the one to go. So that's what happens. She did have to promise, though, to throw the HOH and the veto. So Tommy is evicted. This week, again, Holly spent most of her week just fighting with Jackson. She's about to go home if not for Jackson's crazy move that she disapproved of. At this point in the game, Holly is targeting Nicole, and she's being targeted by Cliff. And she has very little influence on the week. This was very much Jackson and Cliff that decided the outcome here. Heading into week 12, Holly does, in fact, throw the HOH to Nicole on Jackson's urging, but that makes her mad at Nicole for some reason. She says that Nicole bullied her into doing it. Holly makes a deal with Cliff and Nicole to win the veto. I'll be allowed to win the veto, but I will evict Jackson, I promise you. She makes a deal on it. Then Jackson wins the veto and eventually breaks the news to to Cliff and Nicole that he will be, in fact, evicting Cliff. This is all stuff that we just went through this week. Cliff is going to threaten his jury vote, threaten to turn the jury against Jackson in order to stay. Jackson says, "No, sorry." When breaking the news to Cliff, both Jackson and Holly are blaming Cliff and Nicole for this. They are both doing the exact same thing. Jackson is no worse than Holly here. The only difference is that Jackson is doing most of the talking. He is the one making the decision. And so after Holly learns that Cliff is threatening his jury vote and that she is going to get his jury vote because she honored her end of the deal, she is now changing her tune and saying that she threw the HOH because she was honoring her deal, and starts to kind of play into the role that Cliff has put her in. She's being a little nicer. She's being like, hey, I honored my deals. I see what Jackson's doing. I'm just letting him do some things. Up until that point, she was telling Jackson that he was definitely going to win the game, and that she was very pleased to sit next to him in the final two so that he could win. That's what she wanted to do. After learning that she might have a chance to win the game, she is a bit more chipper, but she is still talking to Jackson like, don't worry, I'll take care of you for the rest of your life. It'll be fine. So that's about where Holly is now. Cliff was evicted. Holly really tried to play up the fact that she honored her end of the deal by throwing the HOH. And we came to this week, where they fought in part 1 of the final 3 HOH. Jackson won part 1, and now she will be facing off against Nicole in part 2. Now Nicole will be taking Holly, or at least should be taking Holly, to the final 2, as will Jackson. So Holly should have a guaranteed seat in the final 2. However, we have seen some clips from the jury that indicate that she may not have much of a chance to win the game if she is in the final 2. A lot of people saw her as along for the ride. They didn't really respect her game in the game. That might have changed in the jury house, especially with Kat there to advocate for her. But as of right now, it does look like both Jackson and Nicole may have a leg up on her in the jury. But this is a very difficult one to predict, and it does seem like it's going to be close. So do not bank on any of that. And as we talked about at the beginning of this podcast, this part 2 of the final 3 HOH does seem to be a day's competition, which Holly does struggle in a bit. So that's about where we are at with Holly. Season in summary here for the most part. For the first half of the game, Holly had some ups and downs. She clearly has a base level of solid game instinct. It's like she's socially, she's good socially, right? She knows how to talk to people for the most part. She at the very beginning of the game, she was in on the majority alliances. She was included in things. She was making good relationships. However, strategically, she has made incorrect decisions more often than not. She does not usually make the right call. In fact, oddly, Kat seemed to be the more strategically sound player between the two of them throughout the first half of the season, despite the fact that Kat also made a lot of really terrible calls. Kat was also the person who was probably playing the more influential game, and had more information at times than Holly, or at least contributed a good portion of information at times. If we're comparing Kat and Holly, I would say that Kat had much higher highs and much lower lows, but in general, that Holly was a bit more steady, especially when Kat was there, especially socially. Holly was able to do well socially, but strategically kind of didn't do too well. And socially, she started to falter when she got into the relationship with Jackson. She really started to neglect her other relationships in the house and focus on her relationship with Jackson. If she does lose the game, I think that's why. She neglected those relationships. She focused on Jackson. Jackson did not neglect his other relationships when he was with Holly. Jackson continued to socialize with other people. He maintained his relationships with the rest of the house. He was the person that brought Holly in and out of separate alliances. He was the one that brought people in, like Cliff. Or Cliff at least worked on Jackson. That was a mutual thing there. Holly, the only time Holly branched out was Jess's HOH week when she tried to bond with Jess and Nicole, but that quickly turned around on her as Nicole was turned against Holly the following week. And then the relationship with Jess never really went anywhere because she never really followed up with Jess because she was too focused on Jackson. So that's and we'll talk about what Jackson was doing. Jackson, in comparison to Holly, definitely a more active player, definitely not free of his own mistakes. We'll talk about that. if we're comparing Holly to Nicole, we'll definitely talk about Nicole next week. I think that Nicole is a more strategically sound player, socially not as good at times, and also similarly passive in the game throughout most of the season. I think that Nicole and Holly are actually fairly comparable in terms of their actual gameplay, in the sense that Holly had more social ability that she didn't always utilize. Nicole had more strategic ability that she didn't always utilize. And so they kind of balance each other out in a lot of ways like that. But again, we'll get more into that when we go through Nicole's game. But yeah, overall, first half of the season, she set herself up well socially, made some strategic errors here and there, started to neglect her relationships. By the end of the first half of the game, she had made some big mistakes and set herself up to be in a lot of trouble, and then lost Kat. And by the time she lost Kat, she really just lost the plot and started to drift along, really carried by competition wins, mostly Jackson's, and continuing to make mistake after mistake in terms of the moves that she was making, the people that she was trusting, and did not really engage a whole lot socially, especially from that point forward. So that's about where we see Holly's game, or at least I see Holly's game. Of course, I encourage everybody to come to your own conclusions from what I have told you, from what you have gleaned, if you want to do your own research and all of that. But that's about how I see Holly's game throughout this season of Big Brother 21. I do see her as probably the worst player left of the three. Ultimately, we were high on her early on, but looking back on it, it does appear that it was actually Kat, essentially Kat taking the hits for her and making her look better because of that. And then as soon as Kat left, we saw the Holly that we probably would have seen if Kat had not been there to really help her out and give the advantage that she had in the early portion of the season. That's my take on it, at least. So that's where we are. So thank you guys in the chat for hanging out with me all of this time. I will be back tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern to go through Nicole's game, and you know, that one might get me in trouble. Obviously, I love Nicole, but there's a lot to criticize about Nicole's game. I have a feeling that there's a lot of people that will not be fond of some of that. But there are also things that Nicole did well, and so we can talk about those as well. That I do think some people forget about some of the things Nicole has done well, and I touched on some of them today during Holly's, but there are also a lot of things she did poorly, and so we're gonna have to talk about that as well. So we'll be back tomorrow to talk about Nicole. Jackson will be on Monday. You can find me on Twitch, twitch.tv/Taran Armstrong. I'm on Twitter at Armstrong Taran, Instagram Taran_Armstrong. And of course, tomorrow I'll also be able to let you know, hopefully, what happens here with part 2 of the final 3 HOH. It would be a lot more fun to go through Nicole's game if she wins part 2 and she'll be heading to part 3. It will be a lot more somber if she loses and we know that she's basically out of the game. But we'll have to wait and see. So thank you so much for joining me here. Of course, tomorrow night we will be live to recap the Sunday night episode of the show, and then Monday night the final roundtable during the season will happen, and we'll do the final stock watch during the season, and then Wednesday I will be in LA. I will be away, but we will still have some coverage for the finale for you. So look forward to that. And yeah, thank you once again. If somebody sends this to Holly postseason, I apologize for what I said. But it's my honest opinion, and I gotta be honest. So thank you guys, and I will see you later.